Joining me now is someone who knows better than anyone how sports can bring people together and the power of it all. NBC Sports host and my friend Mike Tirico. Mike, your reaction to the latest update on the Olympics?
Yes, Steph, good morning. It is certainly one that we'll be hearing positive, negative as we get closer to next July. And I think that's the number one thing in the favor of the Olympics, that there is a lot of runway, not just a year, but a year plus. So we all think the country will look different in weeks and months in the world. Who knows what it will look like in a year plus. But that's one of the reasons the 1 year delay was put in. But certainly, as you look around the globe, there is concern at every front of when we're going to get back to normalcy and what an Olympic Games would look like if there is no vaccine, if there are outbreaks of COVID-19 around the world. Certainly, it's so hard to forecast when we're going to see sports in the U.S., let alone the global thing. But I'm sure the Olympic athletes are going to take this in stride and just keep preparing for what they hope is July 23rd, 2021 opening of the Games in Tokyo.
Let's talk about viewership. The Last Dance, the NFL draft, they are providing so much more than sports entertainment. When you see that many people tuning in, what does it tell you?
We're desperate for sports. We're desperate for what is normally a great escape from our everyday realities, except we need that more than ever with all of us under one roof. Empty nesters finding the nest full again, all of that stuff. Civic pride. A reason to root for your city somehow, some way. And we've had that. That's why you see the 7 o'clock shows of support for the healthcare workers in New York. That civic pride is something I think that is inherently there, but we don't often discuss. Sports is one of the outlets for that, and we just haven't had that. So all of that, plus the natural joy that watching something you're connected to, a team that you root for, a school that you went to, compete against someone else and win. It gives you euphoria that otherwise you shouldn't or wouldn't feel. I think we're all missing that. So to watch these things related to sports that are new has given everybody a boost and given those ratings an incredible lift as well.
Joy is missing, but we're also facing serious economic pain with the lack of professional sports. I know the headline du jour is how angry people were that the LA Lakers took a loan that maybe they shouldn't have. But that's just one team. That's one loan. Explain to us the massive economic ecosystem that exists around sports. It's a lot more than just a team.
Yeah, that grabs the headlines when the PPP $4.4 million loan goes to the Lakers that they applied for, and then they give back out of a franchise that has a valuation of over $4.5 billion, according to Forbes. It's hard to reconcile those things. No other NBA team, no NFL team has asked for anything regarding PPP. So that looks like that was just an error on the Lakers' part. The economic impact, Stephanie, is so significant to the people who are connected to sports. First and foremost, you think of the restaurant and bar owners in the areas where stadiums are. I live in Michigan, in downtown Detroit, within a 4-block neighborhood. All 4 pro sports teams, the Lions, the Pistons, the Red Wings, and the Tigers, they play. And that brings tens of thousands of people to that area on a regular basis. 200 days and nights of those restaurants being full with fans, those bars seeing fans pre and post game. Not to mention the ticket takers, the ushers, the popcorn poppers, the people who sell you the beer and the hot dog at the ballpark. That whole economic system is completely shut down. And if we do get back to sports in the near future, there's a good chance it won't be with as many fans as we have seen. So we don't know when that part of the economy will come back as well, which just adds to their uncertainty and adds to their pain as well.
And what will that look like in college towns? When you think about Ann Arbor, where you are, or other big college towns where there's big-time college sports. If the fall comes and those teams aren't playing, those students aren't on campus, what could that do to these colleges, to those towns?
Yeah, it's a 3-pronged answer. I'll try to hit them quick. One is all those businesses, the hotels, the restaurants, they really work themselves around those 6 or 7 days a year when 80 to 100,000 people use the hotels, the restaurants, travel from different parts of the country to watch their school on the weekend. So there's that concern. There's the secondary concern that football especially is the engine for what funds intercollegiate athletics. So a lot of the Olympic sports, gymnastics, volleyball, track and field, those sports are funded by the revenue that comes in from tickets, seat licenses, and TV revenue from football. If that's not there, that will drastically impact what the balance sheet looks like for intercollegiate athletics. And there's going to be no football, Stephanie, if kids are not back on campus in the academic setting. Nobody's going to open up the doors to a football stadium at Notre Dame or one of the other big schools if the students aren't on campus. And that's the other big piece of this. Educators around the country are trying to figure out, can we have fall classes? And that's a decision they're going to have to make pretty soon. If not, and it's another semester online, then you're just going to really impact all those small businesses in every college town around America, big and small. So there's really a huge impact to what's coming up in the next 60 to 90 days. Restart sounds great, but reality is a tougher forecast to kind of envision.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.